On the 24th of June 1976, the UK sweltered. Temperatures had risen steadily for several days, and combined with a lack of rain or wind, conditions were building for one of the hottest summers since records began. The country was well prepared for rain and cold, but a heatwave was a relative rarity. Britain was not ready. Over the course of the next few months, record-breaking temperatures would result in a death toll that mounted into the thousands. The climate of the UK is generally thought of as being wet, rainy and cold, with only a few months of the year where sunshine and higher temperatures can be expected. Indeed, this is such a feature of life in the UK that the country's inclement weather is the subject of many jokes and is thought of as a common topic of conversation, or a common complaint, among UK residents. In an average year, temperatures in the south of the UK will vary. In the winter, you might expect to experience temperatures ranging from 0 Celsius, 32 Fahrenheit, to 7 Celsius, 44.6 Fahrenheit. In the summer, meanwhile, temperatures of between 20 Celsius, 68 Fahrenheit, and 25 Celsius, 77 Fahrenheit, are expected. Rain is generally frequent throughout the year, even in the summer. To fit this climate, most dwellings in the UK are outfitted with central heating, but relatively few are equipped with air conditioning or ceiling fans. Cooling, when necessary, is achieved by opening windows to ventilate a space, and perhaps using portable fans. On the 24th of June 1976, the UK found itself in the early stages of what, for it, represented an extreme heatwave. One day after another dawned with no sign of rain, relatively little cloud, bright sunshine, and little wind. Temperatures soared, climbing to above 30 Celsius, 86 Fahrenheit, in many southern areas. A monitoring station near Heathrow Airport recorded temperatures at this level for 16 continuous days. Meanwhile, the hottest temperature was recorded by a weather station near Cheltenham on the 3rd of July, 35.9 Celsius, or 96.6 Fahrenheit. For some countries, the temperatures seen in the south of the UK during this time reflect a normal summer. But for Britain, they certainly did not. The country and its people were unprepared for such severe and continuous heat, especially when it was paired with an ongoing absence of rain. The amount of rain received had, in fact, been very low for almost an entire year when the heatwave began. In some places and by some people, this unusually hot weather was celebrated. People flocked to the nation's beaches, and many residents were seen sunbathing in public parks. Sales of ice and ice cream skyrocketed, and the few commercial establishments that did have air conditioning, including some cinemas, saw a brisk trade. Many people also cooled off by visiting Lidos, outdoor public swimming pools that had been built in the UK in the 1930s, and many of which were still open and operating in the 1970s. Others cooled off by jumping into rivers, ponds, and even fountains, including the famous Trafalgar Square fountains in London. At the time, sunscreen was viewed as something that one might use while on holiday, but not something that it would occur to most people to use while still in the UK. As such, many people suffered painful sunburn. Also very different were the standards of dress. Most people dressed in a way that might be considered formal by modern standards, and it was less common to wear shorts or other summery clothing. Indeed, when the stewards at the annual Henley Regatta rowing event were permitted to remove their jackets to combat the soaring heat, it was so unusual as to be considered newsworthy. While people enjoyed, or at least endured, the sunshine, transit was thrown into chaos as thousands of cars, lorries, buses and trains overheated and broke down, and tens of thousands of commuters suffered from heat exhaustion while using public transit. The intense heat also caused tarmac roads and pavements to soften, and caused the iconic Great Clock of Westminster, usually referred to as Big Ben, to seize up and stop displaying the correct time for several weeks. In addition to all this chaos, the heat also had catastrophic effects on nature. The heat and lack of wind caused ponds and lakes to stagnate, which resulted in the presence of numerous deadly toxins in the water, including the toxin that causes botulism. Fish, marine creatures, and birds died in the tens of thousands as a result. On top of that, there was a sudden proliferation of ladybirds, which swarmed certain areas in a desperate search for food. These tiny red insects are a frequent sight in the UK, but are normally seen in isolation. Now they spread, becoming a plague. In some places, residents reported millions congregating on every surface, blanketing parks and pavements with an endless swarm of red bodies. The heat caused some crops to experience a bumper year, while others failed in the heat. This had the knock-on effect of dramatically spiking food prices, affecting even those in the cooler northern parts of the country. For many people then, the heatwave was a time that included a mixture of joy and discomfort, stress and pleasure, inconvenience and celebration. But for others, the heatwave was something rather more serious. The unprecedented temperatures represented a real and potentially deadly risk to life. Children, the elderly, and those suffering from medical conditions were at greatest risk. But heat-related illness could also strike those working outside, and, indeed, completely fit and healthy individuals. Over the 3 months when the heatwave was at its peak, approximately 200 people each day died as a direct result of the heat. Some suffered heat stroke or heat exhaustion, while for others the heat and the resultant stress on their bodies exacerbated existing medical conditions. In hospitals, nursing homes, and doctors' surgeries across the country, thousands suffered. Heat was not the only serious risk to life that the country contended with that summer. At the same time, the ongoing dry weather resulted in a drought. Reservoirs used for drinking water all over the country began to run low. Should they run dry, it would be a massive national emergency, and the number of deaths would likely increase. To combat the dwindling supplies of water, a number of measures were instituted. The 1976 Drought Act was implemented in early August, giving the government powers to restrict the water supply when necessary. Only some of the powers granted by the Act were actually used. For example, a hosepipe ban was put in place, forbidding people from using hosepipes to water gardens or wash cars. In some places, the domestic water supply was switched off, and residents would have to retrieve water in buckets from a standpipe or portable water cistern in the street. At the most dire, London had just 90 days of water remaining in its reservoirs. Other parts of the country came within 60 days of running out of water. The extremely short water supply also hampered firefighting efforts for a number of blazes that broke out in areas of woodland and heath all over the UK. Dorset's Herne Forest lost some 50,000 trees in a single fire. Meanwhile, fires across Wales were so prevalent and long-lasting that volunteer firefighters complained, saying that they were being called out so often that they risked losing their day jobs. In late August, with the crisis steadily worsening, politician Dennis Howell was given the newly created position of Minister for Drought, with the task of persuading the nation to conserve water in any way they could. A week after Dennis Howell's promotion to this position, the heatwave broke. Torrential rain doused large tracts of the country. Indeed, there was so much rain that it caused flooding in some areas, and Dennis Howell was thereafter referred to by the media as either the Minister for Floods or the Minister for Rain. The rain continued long enough to replenish reservoirs and avert a catastrophe, and thereafter, temperatures returned to normal. The brutal heatwave of 1976 was considered, at the time, to be a bizarre anomaly. In the years that followed, that exceptional British summer was remembered with a fond nostalgia by some. For the majority, it was a time of both delight and discomfort, and was marked by a series of extraordinary events. Swarms of ladybirds, political upheaval, and scenes of people cooling off in public fountains. For others, however, the heatwave is remembered rather differently. It was, instead, a life-changing disaster, a time of devastating loss and incomprehensible struggle. However, it is remembered, since 1976, summers in Britain have become, on average, hotter as the years go by. The peak temperatures recorded during the deadly historic heatwave of 1976 are now routinely exceeded, with hotter summers seen most recently in 2022 and 2025. The heatwave of 1976, by most estimates, claimed at least 2,500 lives. It is likely not the last exceptional heatwave this usually cold and rainy country will see.